ABC Listen. Podcasts, radio, news, music and more.
Hi, I'm Patricia Carvelis, the host of Politics Now. That's the ABC's podcast covering the political news you need to know when you need to know it. Because politics affects us all. So join me and the ABC's best political journalists for your daily political fix. It's called Politics Now, and you can find it and follow it on the ABC Listen app.
He's 22 years old and facing the prospect of the death penalty. Tyler Robinson, the suspect in the assassination of Charlie Kirk, has now been charged, including with aggravated murder. And while America is accustomed to political assassinations, the response since the shooting has been out of the ordinary. Today, long-time US historian Dan Carter on what's unfolded since Charlie Kirk's death and why the uptick in political violence began well before Trump entered the White House. I'm Sam Hawley on Gadigal land in Sydney. This is ABC News Daily.
The man accused of killing conservative activist Charlie Kirk at a Utah university last week has appeared via video link at a formal charges hearing in the US.
22-year-old Tyler Robinson made his first court appearance, charged with 7 counts, including aggravated murder.
I am filing a notice of intent to seek the death penalty. I do not take this decision lightly, and it is a decision I have made independently as county attorney.
Prosecutors say Robinson texted his roommate and romantic partner and allegedly confessed to the shooting, saying he'd had enough of Charlie Kirk's hate.
Dan, we're going to discuss whether the assassination of Charlie Kirk is a turning point in some way for American politics and for Americans. Now, you're a historian who has witnessed a lot over many, many years, so I think you're well placed to discuss this.
Predicting the future, I've learned from experience is pretty foolhardy,
Yes.
But it is a way of historically looking at events like this and saying, is this an ongoing pattern that's going to change, or is it something that's just very endemic in American culture and society?
Well, why don't we then just step back in time
Sure.
for a moment? Now, Charlie Kirk, I'm not sure you can compare him to Martin Luther King,
No.
but that is a name that has been raised a lot in the last few days, isn't it? He was
Yes.
assassinated, of course, back in 1968.
Good evening. Dr. Martin Luther King, the apostle of nonviolence in the civil rights movement, has been shot to death in Memphis, Tennessee.
King was, of course, one of the many individuals who were assassinated during that period. The 60s was a decade of extraordinary tension brought on by the civil rights movement. It was in this period of enormous conflict, tumult, and tension in American politics. After the 60s, there was, at least in terms of these kind of assassinations and murders, there did seem to be a period of decline, tension, until really the last 15 years.
After the assassination, of course, of Martin Luther King, the candidate for presidency at the time was Robert F. Kennedy, and he spoke afterwards, didn't he, with really uniting words.
Yes.
He was trying to unite the nation.
What we need in the United States is not violence and lawlessness, but is love and wisdom and compassion toward one another, feeling of justice toward those who still suffer within our country, whether they be white or whether they be black.
That was significant, even though he did, of course, go on to be assassinated himself.
And that was true, I think, of most political leaders. Certainly Lyndon Johnson, who became president, talked about this as hoping it was going to be a turning point from violence. But in general, what did happen then was a virtual unanimity. I don't want to exaggerate this, but there really wasn't much political finger pointing. It was not either side saying it's because of you, because you're conservative or liberal or radical or whatever. And that does seem to be different today, I think.
But as you note, after the turbulence of the 1960s, that all really settled down for quite a long time until about the past 15 years. So what changed and when did it change?
It's hard to pick a point at which you'd begin, but this may seem like old history, but Gabby Giffords was a American United States Congresswoman who was gunned down in 2011 for her political views.
A congresswoman in the US fights for her life after being shot at a grocery store.
Gabrielle Giffords was holding a public meeting at a grocery store in Tucson in her home state of Arizona when a man emerged from the crowd and shot her in the head.
And since then, there seems to have been a slowly escalating and increasing number of such incidents.
The man who allegedly attacked the husband of US Speaker Nancy Pelosi was carrying zip ties at the time of the attack.
It's alleged Bolter shot and killed former House Speaker Melissa Hortman and her husband in their home.
Former US President Donald Trump has been shot on stage at a political rally in Pennsylvania.
It's obviously all keyed to the extraordinary, intense nature of tribal politics in which the ideological lines are tightly drawn, in this case between the two major political parties. But also it's the totally changed environment, social media and so on. Clearly that's part of it. There is a space which is opened up in politics in which it's perfectly okay to engage not simply in a rather even fierce exchange of ideas, but also one that is much more personal and much more inclined to view individuals with whom you disagree as somehow un-American. They're not just someone who disagrees with you on politics, but they're a threat to American culture, American society, American politics. And that is something that is really grown in the last 15 years. And as I said, I think it's clearly related.
Yes, and we've seen that, of course, today in the case of Charlie Kirk.
Yes.
So let's turn to what has unfolded in America, Dan, since the assassination of Mr. Kirk. His wife, Erica, on the weekend, she took part in a live stream address. She said it was a battle cry for her husband's causes.
If you thought that my husband's mission was powerful before, you have no idea. You have no idea what you just have unleashed across this entire country.
It's a tragedy beyond words for her and, of course, their children. But what did you make of that?
That's one more example of what I was talking about, in which this tragedy is used as kind of one more weapon in the ideological struggle, the political struggle that's going on in the United States. And as long as it's just language, it's still within the boundaries of a democratic society. I think intensifying it can have pretty devastating consequences for American democracy. We shouldn't use this as an opportunity to glorify his ideas, which were, at least from my perspective, and I think from the majority of Americans, it's more than distasteful, it's hateful. I mean, his comments about African Americans, his comments about Jews, his comments about Muslims, his clearly contemptuous remarks about women. It is, of course, a strand of political thought in this country right now But we should be fighting it, not embracing it, and not as seeing it for something that we need to be promoting at this time.
Well, Dan, the Trump administration certainly hasn't taken the opportunity to try and lower the temperature. The Vice President, J.D. Vance, he actually hosted Charlie Kirk's podcast in the wake of his death.
We have to talk about this incredibly destructive movement of left-wing extremism that has grown up over the last few years, and I believe is part of the reason why Charlie was killed by an assassin's bullet. We're going to talk about how to dismantle that.
And Donald Trump, he too was using really similar language, including on Fox News.
The radicals on the right oftentimes are radical because they don't want to see crime. The radicals on the left are the problem, and they're vicious, and they're horrible, and they're politically savvy.
He's very unlike Robert F. Kennedy in that sense, isn't he?
And he's very unlike the governor of Utah, who spoke very movingly afterwards.
To my young friends out there, you are inheriting a country where politics feels like rage. It feels like rage is the only option. But through those words, we have a reminder that we can choose a different path.
He's a Republican, but I think a very thoughtful individual. The real threat is coming from an administration which sees what has happened as not only a personal tragedy, which it certainly was, but it's also has become a kind of another weapon, leverage to use to stifle free speech in this country. I mean, individuals are being fired because they made indecorous and, in some cases, indecent comments about glorifying or expressing pleasure in the assassination of Charlie Kirk. But we do have something called the First Amendment. And the way to address that is for public opinion to turn against individuals who engage in that kind of behavior, not to use government and to use force to silence people.
They fired this guy Dowd from MSDNC, who's a terrible guy, terrible human being, but they fired him. I hear they're firing other people. And, we're talking about radical left. Now, they're a little bit...
All right. Well, Dan, this assassination does have repercussions, not just in America, but around the world. We've already seen that in the UK, where a far-right leader, Tommy Robinson, he used the death to drum up support for a huge protest, far-right protest in central London.
Yes.
Elon Musk addressed that rally.
The left is the party of murder and celebrating murder. I mean, let that sink in for a minute. That's who we're dealing with here.
My guess is that supporters of Kirk's ideas will try very hard to use this as a way to mobilize support.
All right. Well, Dan, I know you're a historian, but tell me, what do you think comes next? I mean, could this be a turning point for America in some way?
I don't think it'll be a turning point. It is possible that not just because of the Kirk assassination, but in the setting of the growing kind of bitterness and divisions, there could be a cooling off period. What moves against that is the fact that it is of such advantage and the fact that you have the most powerful man on earth pushing those kind of divisions rather than trying to tamp them down. A lot will depend upon what happens in the next election. As it is now, most Republican politicians live in terror of being defeated in a party which is dominated by a very strong, ultra-conservative, even far-right group following Trump, the so-called MAGA faithful. And it means that in this context, we don't have what we often had in the past in situations like this, and that is a bipartisan response in which Republicans and Democrats join together in trying to lower the level of hostilities and anger and language. That's just not there now because they're afraid of President Trump's vengeance and his willingness to use whatever power he has to strike back if they are not following whatever is now, I call it the party line, which is changes from day to day, but there is a party line that's going on here.
Dan Carter was a historian for 45 years, focusing on race relations and US politics. This episode was produced by Jessica Wukyanov, audio production by Cinnamon Nippard. Our acting supervising producer is Sydney Peed. I'm Sam Hawley. Thanks for listening.